The first time I saw that video, I forgot how to breathe. My daughter, Harper, was lying on the ground, her face covered in blood, while a boy in a designer jacket kept kicking her. Behind the camera, I could hear laughter. Boys. Young. Careless. And one of them said, "Don't worry, my uncle's the judge. We're untouchable." Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. My name is Mason. For 20 years, I served as a Navy SEAL. I've seen war, death, and the endless cost of power. But nothing prepared me for that video. It wasn't just the violence. It was the arrogance on that boy's face, the confidence that money and connections would erase his crime. His name was Ryder Preston, the judge's nephew. My daughter Harper had just turned 20. She was a law student, full of fire and dreams. She wanted to change the system that now stood against her. That night, I took the video straight to the police. I still remember the officer's expression after he watched it. He sighed, closed the file, and said carefully, "Mr. Mason, that boy's family is powerful. If I were you, I'd settle this outside of court." That one sentence told me everything I needed to know. The next morning, our house was surrounded by cameras. Reporters shouting questions, neighbors whispering behind fences. The clip had blown up online. Everyone was talking about the judge's nephew beating a girl. Thousands demanded justice on social media. But while the world screamed, those who held power stayed silent. Behind closed doors, something dark was already moving. By the time we reached court, I could feel it. The system was already bought. The courtroom was a theater. The smell of polished wood mixed with the cold perfume of arrogance. Judge Preston himself presided over the case. The very man whose nephew had hurt my daughter now sat high above us, pretending to be impartial. Harper sat beside me, trembling. Her wrists were still wrapped from the injuries. Every flash from a camera outside still made her flinch. The opposing lawyer played clips before the jury, edited versions of the video that cut out every moment of Ryder's violence. What they left in were the seconds where Harper screamed, trying to crawl away. The lawyer said calmly, "Your Honor, this appears to be a confrontation between young adults, not a criminal attack." When I stood up to speak, Judge Preston's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Mr. Mason, you are not permitted to address this court without representation." Just like that. Cold. Controlled. Dead inside. Harper started to cry quietly beside me. I wanted to put a hand on her shoulder, but my fists were clenched too tight. The muscles in my arm were shaking with a kind of anger I hadn't felt since my last deployment. The prosecutor grinned, closing his briefcase. "Not enough evidence, Your Honor. The girl's story seems inconsistent. It's hard to trust such emotion." There was a pause. Then laughter. Actual laughter in the courtroom. Even the deputy smirked. I turned toward the back of the room and saw him. Ryder Preston, leaning back, chewing gum, smiling like a king among insects. He met my eyes and winked. That moment carved itself into my brain like shrapnel. The judge raised his gavel. "Case dismissed. Lack of credible evidence." My daughter gasped. A painful sound that cut through my chest. Around us, people talked, laughed, even clapped. Ryder's mother whispered something to a reporter with a grin on her face. The world moved on, and we were left in silence. In that single second, I understood something I'd ignored for years. Evil doesn't always look like a man with a gun. Sometimes it wears a robe. Sometimes it passes judgment. Harper hid her face in her hands as we walked out of the courtroom. Cameras flashed again. Reporters shouted for comments. I kept walking straight until we reached the car. She finally whispered, her voice breaking, "Dad, they laughed at me." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My heart was hammering too loud. That night, I didn't turn on any lights. Sat in the dark. The silence felt heavier than combat. I kept replaying that courtroom in my head. The judge's smug face, the laughter, and that boy's wink. I thought about the missions I'd been on. The operations where patience and silence mattered more than bullets. The way we used to dismantle an enemy. not by storming in rage, but by studying every detail, every weakness. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about fury. It was mathematics. Pattern. Precision. And I knew patterns. At 1:43 a.m., I stood up, walked to my closet, and unlocked a metal box I hadn't touched in years. Inside was my old Navy SEAL field knife. Scratched, silver, crafted for survival. The handle felt cold, familiar, like a part of myself that had been waiting. I didn't hold it as a weapon. I held it as a memory. A reminder of who I used to be. The man who never broke under pressure. The man the Navy once called the Phantom because he completed missions no one dared to attempt. That man was gone, or so I thought. Now I could feel him waking again, bone by bone, heartbeat by heartbeat. The father they humiliated was vanishing. The soldier was returning. I sat the knife on the table, stared at its dull gleam under the moonlight, and whispered words that chilled even me. They don't know who I am yet, but they will. And in that whisper, a promise was born. Not to kill, not yet, but to make every one of them face what they laughed at. Because you can't bury a SEAL. You can only wake him. And that courtroom had just done exactly that. That night didn't end with sleep. I sat awake, listening to the house moan under the wind. Harper's room was silent, but I could still hear her crying hours later. The muffled kind that breaks a father's bones one breath at a time. By dawn, I was sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon like I used to before a mission. But this time there was no radio in my ear, no briefing file in my hand. Just the face of my daughter on that courtroom bench, her voice lost in a system that chose arrogance over truth. The courthouse was supposed to bring closure. Instead, it gave me a direction. 3 days later, I visited the local precinct to retrieve the official case record, playing the part of a calm, defeated father. The officer behind the desk, same one who told me to settle privately, tried not to meet my eyes. When I flipped the folder open, half the evidence was missing. No mention of the uncut video. No report on the witnesses who filmed it. Just a few blurred stills and Harper's emotional statement labeled unreliable. I closed the file and smiled tightly. "You lost some pages," I said. He shrugged. "Maybe the DA's office has them. Maybe. Or maybe someone made a call." By evening, I was parked across from Judge Preston's private club in downtown. Through the window, I could see him laughing with city officials, whiskey glass in hand. The same gavel hand that erased my daughter's pain. That laughter, it was the same sound from the courtroom. Same rhythm. Same victory smirk. I leaned back in my truck and opened an old metal notebook I hadn't used since my last deployment. A tactical log. I wasn't listing targets. I was listing patterns. Everyone leaves a pattern. Texts, calls, habits. You just have to trace the noise behind their silence. I began with Preston's nephew, Ryder. His social media was flooded with arrogance. Photos at parties, luxury cars, champagne flutes balanced on girls' shoulders. But late one night, he posted something quickly deleted. A picture of him in the same jacket from the assault video, with the caption, "Lesson learned." I saved the screenshot. That was his first mistake. The second came from someone he partied with, a girl named Violet, tagged in several posts. I sent her a simple message. "Did you record what happened that night?" 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. She didn't reply with words, just sent a 7-second clip. The original angle, the one they edited out. It showed Ryder swinging first, Harper on the ground, and his friends cheering him on. The video ended with Violet screaming, "Turn it off," because she saw blood. I sat frozen. Proof. Real proof. But proof didn't matter when the law wore blindfolds made of money. Still, it gave me something else, a route. That night, I met Victor. Old teammate. Old ghost. He ran a private logistics firm now. Mostly legal work, sometimes not. The bar was empty except for us. He looked me over with that knowing SEAL stare and said, "You planning to talk? Or are you already marching?" I handed him a flash drive. This is what he did to my daughter. He watched 2 seconds, stopped the video, and exhaled through his teeth. You sure you want to open that door again? It's already open. He nodded once, as if accepting an old code between brothers. All right. If you're going back to war, do it clean. No guns, no blood. Make them destroy themselves. That line stayed with me. Make them destroy themselves. I returned home just before midnight. Harper was asleep on the couch, wrapped in one of my old Navy sweatshirts. One hand still clutched a photo of her and her mom. She looked smaller somehow, like life had pressed her into a corner. I knelt beside her and whispered, "You did nothing wrong." They did. I promised myself she'd never cry in that house again. For the next week, I worked silently. The way we used to build an operation: gather intel, identify pressure points, wait for the perfect moment to strike. But this wasn't about weapons or explosions. It was about collapsing a wall from its own cracks. I traced bank accounts, public records, and contracts tied to the Preston family. Most of them led to one place: a foundation that donated to the same courthouse where my daughter's case was dismissed. It was a self-funded circle of corruption, money laundering disguised as community charity. My military training taught me how to extract truth from noise, and this city was screaming with it. Meanwhile, Harper barely left her room. I could hear her typing on her laptop, replaying posts, reading comments blaming her, calling the incident mutual conflict. Society will break your heart before your enemies ever do. One evening, she came to me quietly. "Dad," she said, "please don't do anything stupid." I smiled without looking up. "What makes you think I would?" "Because I know you," she whispered, tears forming. "You don't forget." She was right. I didn't forget. I couldn't. That night, I stood outside, watching rain hit the concrete like gunfire. In every droplet, I saw the reflection of those who thought they'd won. I whispered to the dark. They laughed at my daughter in court. Let's see how they laugh when the world watches them burn, one secret at a time. I didn't mean fire. I meant exposure. Truth burns harder than bullets when aimed right. By the next morning, 3 news outlets received anonymous, encrypted emails, each containing one document from that charity fund. A teaser. No threats. No signature. Just truth placed precisely where arrogance tends to trip. And just like that, small tremors started. A reporter tweeted about unexplained financial irregularities in Judge Preston's office. A city official quietly resigned. The courthouse whispered but didn't know where to look. Ryder still posted his usual arrogance online, until one of his friends turned on him, leaking private chat screenshots mocking Harper's trauma. Now the public was beginning to turn too. I didn't smile. Not yet. But the board was moving. Sometimes revenge isn't a bullet. It's a mirror. You let your enemies stare at themselves until they can't. I'd spent decades learning how to dismantle enemies in silence. This one was no different. They thought I was just a broken old man. They were wrong. Because war doesn't start when you pick a weapon. It starts when you decide what's worth fighting for. And I had just decided. Revenge doesn't happen in explosions. It happens in silence. In planning. In patience. The morning after those news leaks, I went back to my old habits. Black coffee, early wake-up, observation. Harper still slept. She needed rest, not more questions. I needed movement. That's when I opened the garage and uncovered an old duffel bag marked Seal, Class 18. Inside were pieces of my past. Tactical maps, coded notebooks, compact surveillance gear. Tools for recon, not murder. My mission wasn't to kill. It was to reveal. I started small, researching every person who laughed in that courtroom. The prosecutor, the defense lawyer, the bailiff who smirked when Harper cried. I made a chart on my wall, linking connections like a web of arrogance. It didn't take long to see the pattern. They were all funded by or connected to Preston's charity. Corruption was the family business. One night, while scrolling through leaked contracts, I found a name that broke the pattern. Felix Morton, a legal clerk who quietly handled the judge's paperwork. No photos online. No social profile. But the accounting records showed large monthly consulting fees for him, routed through shell companies. I found his address, drove there around midnight, and parked 2 blocks away. The neighborhood was quiet, upper middle class, nothing unusual. Through his front window, I could see him hunched at a laptop, alone. From the way his head moved, he was watching something nervously. Security footage, maybe. My instincts told me Felix was the weak link. The kind of man who joined the game out of fear, not greed. The next day, I followed him to his office. He was jittery, glancing behind him twice before entering. When I walked in after him, he recognized me instantly. His face went pale. He whispered, "You're Mason, right? The SEAL guy?" I didn't deny it. I just said, "You work for Preston." He looked around, voice trembling. "You don't want to be seen talking to me." "You and I are already seen," I said quietly. "But the question is, do you want to stay part of his story or start rewriting it?" That one line did it. The fear cracked. We sat in a back office corner. He kept his voice low. "I didn't touch those case files. The judge ordered them shredded. Said the girl's video was, what word did he use? Inflammatory. He told me to delete any backups or lose my job." I leaned forward. "Did you delete them?" Felix hesitated, then whispered, "No. I backed everything to a private drive at home. I couldn't watch that girl's face again without doing something." For the first time in weeks, I felt the edge of hope. "I need that drive." He nodded slowly, handed me a business card, and said, "Come by tomorrow night. My wife's at work then." That was enough. The next evening, I picked up the drive, a small black external hard disk labeled P01. Inside it was everything. The uncut courtroom CCTV, the real evidence logs, transcripts, and even private messages between Judge Preston and his nephew discussing damage control. They didn't just cover Harper's beating. They manipulated multiple assault cases for years. Felix asked, "What are you going to do with it?" I said, "Let people see what justice looks like when you strip money out of it." He didn't ask more. I could see fear mixed with relief in his eyes, the kind that comes when you finally stop being part of the lie. That night, I met with Victor again. He had a small warehouse he used for training mercenaries, quiet, secure. We played the footage on a projector in silence. The room felt cold despite the heat. Victor muttered, "You're sitting on a bomb, brother." "I know. Planning to blow it up?" "Not yet. Explosion doesn't scare men like Preston. Exposure does." He smiled faintly. "Still the same phantom, huh?" We didn't need to say more. He knew what came next. Timing, infiltration, and patience. I went home before dawn. Harper was awake this time, sitting at the kitchen table with cold coffee. She looked tired but more alert. She asked, "You've been out every night lately. What are you doing?" I sat across from her, protecting what's left of truth. She stared at me, studying the tone beneath my words. "You're planning something, aren't you?" "I'm fixing something," I said. She didn't press further. She just said softly, "Don't lose yourself again, Dad. I already lost you once when you were in service." I said nothing. She didn't know. Service never left me. It just slept. Over the next week, pieces started falling into place. Preston's public image took minor hits as documents circulated online anonymously. He made statements denying corruption, called it digital blackmail. But buried news stories began to surface, victims from old cases coming forward. People he'd ruled against 10, 15 years ago, finally speaking. The dam was cracking. I wasn't stopping now. I was accelerating. One night, while reviewing Preston's latest statement, I noticed something. The judge had casually mentioned a family dinner planned to honor his late brother at their private estate. Ryder's uncle, the man who orchestrated this whole cover-up, would be there. That's when I decided. I'd walk into that dinner uninvited. Not with guns or threats, but with truth in my pocket. Victor protested when I told him, "You're playing chess in a room full of snakes." "Exactly," I said. "And snakes panic when the ground shifts." He offered backup. I refused. "This one's mine." By the time I reached home, the world outside was quiet again. But inside, I could feel the storm building. Harper was asleep on the couch again, television flickering faintly across her face. I looked at her and knew I wasn't fighting for revenge anymore. I was fighting to make sure the next father wouldn't have to bury his daughter while the courtroom clapped. And for that, silence was no longer my weapon. Truth was, the war had started. Quiet, controlled, and unstoppable. The night before the Prestons' dinner, I couldn't sleep. The air had that stillness that seals feel before a strike. Too quiet, too clean. I wasn't going to kill anyone, but I knew something inside me would die that night. The last piece of the man who still believed in justice. When I closed my eyes, I saw flashes, desert winds swirling around broken stone walls, my team's shadows moving under moonlight. We never spoke much on missions. Language got in the way of instincts. But I heard one voice, always clear. My commanding officer back in Kandahar. Precision wins wars, Mason. Emotion loses them. For years, that line had kept me alive. Now, I whispered it again, not for survival, but for vengeance. By sunrise, I was back in the garage, checking the gear Victor sent me, a body camera disguised as a pen, an audio recorder inside my watch, and a burner phone preloaded with a secure upload channel. My plan was simple. Walk into Preston's private memorial dinner disguised as a security contractor. Leave unseen with enough recordings to make them crumble on their own words. But first, Harper. She was in the kitchen, hair tied up, staring blankly at her untouched plate. The TV in the background was repeating the same story. Judge Preston responds to corruption allegations, denies connection to any bribery. She looked at me and asked quietly, "When you look at him on the screen, what do you feel?" I thought for a long second. The same thing I used to feel when I stared through a scope. Distance. Clarity. She frowned. "You're scaring me, Dad. I'm not going to hurt anyone, Harper. Not the way you think." Tears gathered in her eyes. "Then what are you doing?" "Finishing what they started," I said softly. I didn't wait for her to respond. Sometimes you have to move before your courage asks questions. By late afternoon, I was inside Bishop Estate, the Prestons' countryside mansion, hired under a fake badge arranged by Victor. The tune of a string quartet floated through the air as servers and guests mingled under chandeliers. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same man who silenced victims now surrounded himself with charity banners and politicians. Ryder was there too, suit crisp, ego glowing. His mother, in diamonds, leaned close to him as if feeding him lines on how to smile in public. Judge Preston stood at the center of it all, shaking hands, performing graciousness like an art. I stayed near the back, scanning exits, timing their interactions. Every movement calculated. How long it took Preston to step between guests, where the cameras faced, how the guards rotated outside. Years of training kicked in as muscle memory. Then I heard it, Preston's voice, loud and cheerful, saying, "To my late brother, and to the legacy of this family, may honor always guide us." I nearly laughed. Honor. The word burned coming from him. As the toast ended, Preston stepped toward a group of investors. I drifted closer, my body camera active. The men talked freely. Arrogance makes people careless. Words like donations, contracts, campaign kickbacks rolled off their tongues casually. Prestons didn't even realize they were handing me their confession on a silver platter. Suddenly, Ryder appeared beside me. Too close. He squinted. "You're new. What's your name?" I met his stare calmly. "Logan." He smirked. "You ex-military? You've got that dead look in your eyes." I didn't blink. "Something like that." He laughed. "My uncle loves hiring your type. Loyal, no questions asked. You should stick around. Might learn what real power looks like." He turned, walking away without recognizing the man whose daughter he destroyed. That was the moment I knew my path was right. They didn't see me because they'd never looked beyond their own reflection. I slipped into the study later under the excuse of checking perimeter security. Inside, the room was dim, filled with portraits, all men. No women. No legacy of empathy. I found Preston's private desk. One drawer was locked, but I'd picked worse locks in Afghanistan under blackout. 20 seconds later, it clicked open. Inside was a single folder labeled Internal Coordination. I opened it. Wire transfers, signatures, dates matching the day of Harper's trial. Payments routed from a contractor firm to Preston's personal account. One note scrawled in his handwriting sent a chill through me. HS case handled. Insure girl discredited. My daughter reduced to an acronym. For a second, I had to grip the desk to steady my hands. My pulse hammered. Kill the emotion. Stay precise. You don't win wars by shaking. I photographed every page with the hidden pen camera, tucked them back, and left without leaving a trace. Outside, the air felt heavier. The moon hung like a spotlight on predators dressed as gentlemen. As I crossed the lawn to leave, a voice stopped me. Hey, you dropped this. I turned. It was Violet, the same girl who had sent me that original 7-second clip. She held out an envelope I'd placed intentionally by the gate. A decoy. You're not security, she said softly. I studied her face, calm but alert. You already knew that. She nodded. I remembered your name from the news. Mason, Harper's father. I didn't know what they did with that video. Not until later. What are you doing here? My boyfriend works for the Preston's PR team. I shouldn't even be talking to you. But she hesitated. Ryder bragged last week. Said your daughter would never recover. That she'd probably do something stupid. He laughed. I couldn't stand it. Her voice broke on the word laughed. I handed her my phone, recording quietly. Say that again. She did. Every word. By the time she finished, her hands were shaking. Please, she whispered. If you do something, don't drag me into it. I'm not here to destroy lives, I told her. I'm here to make sure every victim they mocked gets their truth back. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and disappeared into the dark. When I reached the truck, I pulled off the badge, leaned against the seat, and exhaled. Step by step, piece by piece, I was building a weapon that required no ammunition, just truth. Back home, Harper was waiting up for me. You didn't come back for dinner, she said quietly. I was working, I replied. Her eyes landed on my jacket pocket, where the folder faintly outlined through the fabric. Dad, I don't want this to consume you. I sat down, tired but alive. Harper, what they did wasn't just to you. It was to every person who trusted the system. She whispered, and when you finish? Then what? That question cut deeper than I expected. I didn't have an answer. I looked at her, the same brown eyes that once watched me walk away on deployment, and said, then maybe I sleep again. She nodded slowly, understanding something unspoken. That revenge wasn't only mine, it was hers too. But our version wouldn't come from fire. It would come from truth that burned cleaner. By morning, I sent Victor all the recordings. He called an hour later. Mason, this isn't just local corruption. These files tie half the city council to bribes. You're crossing into federal waters. Good, I said. The truth deserves a bigger ocean. You're lighting a fuse you can't control. I'm not lighting it, I said quietly. They are. That day, for the first time, Harper asked to see the videos. I watched her watch herself. Replay of the beating, then the courtroom laughter, then her name in Preston's memo. HS case handled. At first, she cried. Then she stopped, straightened, and whispered, if you're going to expose them, don't stop halfway. I realized then that revenge had changed shape. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about her standing again. It was about making her strong enough to face the noise without fear. That night, thunder rolled above the house like distant artillery. I stood by the window, watching the flashes, feeling that familiar electric sense before impact. For years, I fought wars on foreign soil for flags and orders. This time, I was fighting one for something simpler, dignity. And as lightning split the sky, I whispered to the rain, Phase 2 begins. The ghost they buried was gone. The phantom had returned. In war, you never move too early. You move when the enemy still feels safe. That's when precision turns into power. A week after I infiltrated Preston's dinner, the first cracks began to show. The media caught pieces of the leaked documents, and the tone of the coverage shifted from curiosity to suspicion. Headlines using words like cover-up, bribery, conflict of interest. Every story was a drop of pressure, but not enough to break the dam. Not yet. Harper and I watched on TV as Preston smiled during a live interview, denying everything with polished confidence. He called it a cyber attack from bitter extremists. When he said that, using bitter extremists, I almost laughed. He was describing me, and he didn't even know it. Victor called that night from an encrypted line. "You're in every newspaper, bro, just not by name," he said. "You wanted exposure. You're getting it." "I don't want attention," I said evenly. "I want accountability." "And what's your next move?" Stage 3. Let the puppets start pulling their own strings too tight. I began tracking the judge's hidden network: contractors, bankers, government officials. Victor's guys helped dig quietly, tracing wire trails that connected the charity fund to construction kickbacks and campaign contributions. They weren't subtle people. They had a pattern. Money went in from corporations, filtered through Preston's foundation, and came out for court election campaigns and personal bonuses. A perfect laundering loop, clean on paper, filthy underneath. I uploaded short bursts of evidence online under anonymous accounts. Not all at once, just enough to make predators bite each other. When powerful men panic, their instinct is to throw blame. I wanted chaos inside their fortress. Within 48 hours, the first betrayal happened. Preston's partner leaked a statement defending himself, claiming he didn't know about finance mismanagement. That single line showed desperation, cracks forming. The media devoured it. Victor called me again. "You're splitting the family, Mason. They're lawyering up, turning on each other." "Good," I said. "The moment they fight each other, they become distracted." Meanwhile, Harper was changing too. She wasn't the broken, silent girl from that courtroom anymore. She spent time reading statements from other victims of similar cover-ups. One evening, she approached me, holding her laptop. "Dad, there's a group of girls online. They were discredited in the same courts Preston oversees. They're scared to speak. What if we give them a voice?" For the first time, she was thinking like a fighter. Not out of anger, but out of strength. "I'll protect whoever you bring forward," I told her. She nodded. "Then it's time they stop hiding too." The next morning, we woke up to a storm, not outside, but on every major news outlet. One of Preston's old cases resurfaced, showing that a child abuse report had been buried to protect a senator's son. That connection linked back to money paid through Preston's charity. The judge went silent publicly, canceling appearances. The city buzzed with rumors. But behind that silence, I knew he was growing paranoid. A man like him doesn't back down. He digs deeper into denial until he's forced to drown in it. That afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. A familiar voice came through, "Ryder. You think you're clever?" he said. His arrogance had turned sharp, brittle. "I know it's you. You're feeding this crap to the press." I kept my tone flat. "You should be careful throwing accusations." "I'll make you careful," he snapped. "You have no idea who you're messing with." He hung up before I could reply. I smiled quietly. That was his first real mistake. Fear makes the privilege dangerous, but predictable. I traced his number easily. It came from a property owned by their family outside the city. Security cameras, motion sensors, typical setup. But there was a digital gate to that system, and Victor owed me a favor. The next day, a new clip surfaced on social media. Ryder at a private party weeks before, drunk, bragging that his uncle fixes everything. The internet exploded. Channels replayed it endlessly. The same people who used to cheer him now called for his arrest. Preston's reputation was bleeding publicly now, but I wasn't satisfied yet. This was never just about exposure. It was about stripping away every shield they'd built. Late one night, Harper found me on the porch staring at the rain. "You look like you're waiting for something," she said. "I am," I murmured. "Confession." She frowned. "They'll never confess, Dad." They will, I said softly. When lies become heavier than fear. She didn't understand yet, but she would soon. A few days later, Victor sent word that Preston's nephew and lawyer were meeting at a private hotel on the coast. Damage control, off the record. That was the kind of scene where mistakes happen, and I needed evidence of their corruption in real time. I drove there under night fog. The hotel faced the ocean, mostly empty. I wore a hood, carrying only the pen camera. Through a cracked service door, I could hear them arguing inside a suite. You're supposed to manage this, Ryder shouted. You swore they'd never find those files. The press is eating us alive, the lawyer barked back. And your uncle's panicking. If you just kept quiet, Ryder snapped. My life's ruined because of that girl's father. That was the sentence I came for. Spoken clearly, angrily, recorded without him knowing. Their words weren't just about panic. They were confession. Clear, irrefutable, and dripping with guilt. I left without anyone noticing. Outside, I slipped off the hood and stared at the sea. I'd spent my youth diving under darker waves than that, chasing ghosts and orders. But this war, the one for my daughter, was the first that actually meant something. The next morning, social media caught fire again. The audio clip of Ryder's meeting had leaked. I uploaded it through a new channel titled The Puppet Masters. His voice filled the feeds. My life's ruined because of that girl's father. For the first time, the world made the connection. The bullied girl had a name again. Harper Mason. Reporters showed up outside our home. I watched from the window, quietly. Harper stood behind me and whispered, "They know now." She was scared, but I could see something else behind her eyes. Pride. The battle had turned public, and there was no going back. Judge Preston, cornered by cameras, finally addressed the press. He looked older, uncertain, but his arrogance hadn't disappeared. This is a targeted smear campaign. My family and I have nothing to hide, he said. A reporter shouted. Then why are there federal agents reviewing your charity accounts? The color drained from his face. That was confirmation enough. The bureau was circling. My plan was nearly complete. Victor called one last time that night. Your leak reached Washington. They're opening investigations. You did what no one else could. I didn't answer right away. I looked at Harper sitting near the fireplace, the glow softening her face. Peaceful for the first time in months. Victor said, "You're done, Mason. Let the system finish." I finally replied. The system doesn't finish until he feels what she felt. There was silence on the line. Then Victor said low, "What's left to do?" "Expose the last layer," I said. The truth behind his smile. "You mean the footage?" "Yes. The uncut version of everything. The one they hid. The one where they all laughed." Victor sighed. "Once you drop that, Mason, there's no coming back." "I don't want to," I said. And I meant it. 2 nights later, I uploaded the full video, raw, unedited, with Preston's own handwriting and bribe logs flashed between cuts. It hit the net like a shockwave. The city exploded in outrage. The courthouse sealed his office by morning. I watched, silent, as breaking news flooded every screen. Judge Preston suspended amid growing scandal. Federal inquiry pending. Ryder's smug grin was gone from every social platform. Sponsors vanished. Friends deleted him. The family that laughed in a courtroom was now hiding from the world. Harper stood beside me, holding my hand. For the first time in months, she said it aloud, steady and strong. We won. But deep down, I knew we were only halfway through. Public humiliation wasn't the end. Justice needed more than headlines. It needed truth written in history. I glanced at the ocean outside and whispered, "Not yet." This war wasn't over. Not until the judge faced the ghosts he created. And I was about to bring them all to his doorstep. The morning the headlines broke, the world felt different. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages, alerts, reporters, old military contacts all sending the same thing. Preston suspended. Federal investigation confirmed. I sat at the table, coffee untouched, watching footage of the man who once ruled a courtroom now surrounded by microphones. His voice trembled as he called the leaks malicious falsehoods. The eyes that once looked down on my daughter were now searching desperately for a place to hide. Harper came into the room still half asleep, wearing the same hoodie she'd lived in for weeks. She rubbed her eyes, looked at the TV, and whispered, "He looks smaller now." She was right. Monsters always do once the lights hit them. I muted the TV, turned to her, and said, "It's starting." She frowned. "Starting? Dad, it looks like it's ending." I shook my head. "Not until he admits the truth." The phone buzzed again. "Victor." I answered. "They've frozen his accounts," he said. "Preston's family is panicking. But there's something you need to know. 2 of his allies lawyered up, and Ryder's been hiding at a lake house up north. You might become a target." I looked out the window at the quiet street. "Let them come. They're still playing defense." Victor paused. "Careful, Mason. You're not invisible anymore. Eyes are on you too." When the call ended, I took a deep breath. He was right. This war was no longer in the shadows. Every move mattered. By noon, the city courthouse was swarmed with protesters chanting Harper's name. Signs reading "Justice for Harper Mason" filled the steps. I watched from the truck parked across the street, not for pride, but to confirm something: momentum. Once public trust turns, even the powerful drown in their own arrogance. As I watched, a car pulled up behind me. The mirror caught a flash of movement. A man stepped out wearing a black suit and earpiece, security detail. Not police, not press. Contracted muscle. My instincts sharpened. He wasn't heading to Preston's office. He was walking toward my truck. I grabbed my phone and dialed Victor. "You send anyone?" "No." "Why?" "Because someone just did." The agent reached the driver's side, tapped on the glass, and said, "Mr. Mason?" I rolled down the window an inch. "Who's asking?" "Private representative. Judge Preston wishes to resolve this matter, quietly." I almost laughed. "He's a little late for quiet." He stiffened. "There's still time to make it civilized." "Remind him," I said. "I retired from civilized a long time ago." He leaned closer. "Walk away, Mason. You've made your point. Keep pushing, and this turns ugly." I met his stare. "I used to specialize in ugly." He didn't reply, just stepped back and walked away, disappearing into a gray sedan. But I knew that wasn't over. Preston had finally realized who was behind the curtain, pulling his empire apart. That night, Victor showed up at my home unannounced. Harper was in her room. He looked tense, his jacket damp from rain. "You're being watched," he said flatly. My contact traced 2 rental cars, one near here, one outside my place. "I think Preston hired ex-military contractors." "Former soldiers?" I asked. He nodded. "Hardened types. People who'll think you're a threat to order." I smirked. "They won't see me coming." Victor's expression hardened. "Mason, this isn't Afghanistan. You win nothing if you end up behind bars." I stayed silent, staring through the window at the dark streets. "They laughed at my daughter, Vic. I'm not stopping because they're scared now." He sighed. "Then, at least, don't do this alone." The rain outside got heavier. It sounded like artillery, the kind you feel in your bones long before it lands. The following day, the chaos hit full force. News reports said federal agents raided Preston's estate. Computers, bank records, private correspondence, all seized. The story consumed national headlines. Images showed boxes leaving the mansion, reporters shouting questions, and Preston shoved into a black SUV. The country loved watching the fall of untouchable men. But justice isn't ratings, it's risk. Later that evening, a message appeared on my laptop, anonymous email, encrypted. No subject line. It opened to one video file. I played it. The screen flickered, showing Preston seated in a dark room, speaking directly to the camera. "You think this is justice?" he said. "You think humiliating me restores your daughter's honor? You've started something you can't stop. When the law fails, everyone becomes the villain, including you." The message ended there. No threat, no name, just a mirror of pride trying to sound righteous. But in his eyes, I saw fear. Genuine, unfamiliar fear. Harper walked in just then and froze. What is that? Proof he knows he's losing. She crossed her arms, searching my face for what came next. So, what's the plan now? I hesitated, watching her reflection in the screen. I'm taking the truth further. Dad, you've already won. He's exposed. Not yet. He still controls the story. I need him to confess. She shook her head. You're not chasing justice anymore. You're chasing completion. Her words hit hard. She wasn't wrong. Revenge has no finish line. It drags you until you forget where it started. 3 nights later, Preston held an unsanctioned press meeting from his home. Desperate move. He didn't allow reporters inside, just a live stream. Harper and I watched together. He began calm, denying corruption again. Then someone off-screen interrupted, handing him a phone. He froze, lips tightening. His live stream was hacked. The opener replaced by the courtroom clip of Harper sobbing, overlaid with his voice saying, "Case dismissed due to lack of credible evidence." Tens of thousands watched it online. Instant viral chaos. Preston's face drained of color. He ended the live broadcast abruptly, silence overtaken by outrage. Comments flooded in, demanding resignation, arrest, accountability. Harper looked at me, wide-eyed. That wasn't you, was it? I smiled slightly. Guess truth has a way of spreading. Maybe it was Victor's contacts, maybe someone else finally standing up, but the world now saw everything. No edits, no lies, just the raw arrogance of a man who thought his title made him untouchable. The next morning, reporters camped outside our home again. But this time, they weren't asking about the case. They were asking about me. Mr. Mason, were you responsible for the leaks? Do you have military connections helping you? Are you afraid of retaliation? I said nothing. Just walked Harper past them to the car, cameras flashing like gunfire. Inside, she turned to me. Dad, I don't want you to disappear again. I looked at her, so strong now, so steady. If I disappear, it's because I need to finish what I started. Her jaw tightened. Then promise you'll come back. I will, I said. For good this time. That night, I sat alone with the last piece of the puzzle, a confidential report Felix had given me weeks ago. It contained Preston's private correspondence with defense attorneys, proof he manipulated at least 12 more cases. Victims who never saw justice because he buried evidence. This was the bullet I hadn't fired yet, the one that would end him. I uploaded the files to my cloud archive, ready for release. But I waited, because the silence before the fall has its own power. You let the enemy taste hope for just a moment before ripping it away. At 2 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Mason, a voice rasped. This is Preston. I froze. How did you get this line? He ignored the question. You think you've exposed me, but you have no idea how deep this goes. Step away, and maybe, I'll let your family see quiet again. I said nothing for a full 10 seconds. Then quietly, you should have thought of my family before you laughed at my daughter. He exhaled sharply. You're playing soldier again. But this isn't a war. It is, I said, and you already lost. I hung up, deleted the call log, and turned off the lights. Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon. Thick, heavy, final. Unmasking the king wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about closure. And tomorrow morning, I planned to end his reign for good. By morning, the silence outside my house felt wrong. No birds, no passing cars, just a stillness that pressed against the windows. Years in combat train you to sense danger before it moves, and I could feel it now, crawling under my skin. I stepped onto the porch, coffee in hand, scanning the street. A black SUV sat 2 houses down, engine idling, tinted enough to hide faces, but not intent. They weren't reporters. They were waiting. I went back inside, calm but alert. Harper, I called softly. She stepped out of her room, tired, hair messy, holding a mug of cold tea. What's wrong? She asked. Pack your things, I said. We're leaving for a few days. Her face changed. Is this about them? It's about safety, I answered. Go light. No electronics. She started to argue, but my tone ended it. 15 minutes later, we were in the truck heading east toward a back road I hadn't driven in years. The SUV followed for 4 blocks before turning. They didn't want to chase. They wanted me nervous. I wasn't. They just confirmed what I already knew. Preston had moved from defense to offense. We reached an old cabin on the edge of a lake by dusk. It was military-owned once, a training retreat I'd used after deployment. Isolated, unlisted, safe. Harper looked around uneasily. Dad, she whispered, how long do we have to stay here? Until I finish this. I said it like an order, not a comfort. Inside, I set up temporary cameras from an old duffel bag, silent motion sensors, battery-powered, almost invisible. Just precautions. I'd learned long ago that peace is the most dangerous illusion. While Harper slept that night, I sat outside watching the dark water. For the first time in weeks, the stillness felt familiar. Knowing someone was out there didn't scare me. It reminded me I finally had them on the same playing field. By the second night, they came. It started with a soft hum, vehicles rolling over gravel far down the road. I turned off the cabin lights, crouched by the window. 2 trucks. No plates. For men exited, shapes moving like they'd been trained. Not amateurs. Contractors. I moved to the basement, pulled open my equipment case. No weapons, just tools. Thermal goggles, a knife, flashlight, and the same camera pen I'd used at Preston's estate. If they were here for me, they'd give me something better than fear. They'd give me proof. The first man broke from the group, circling around the side entrance. Another stayed near the vehicles, whispering into a radio. I stepped out quietly through the back door. The air was cold enough to sting. The moon hung low, giving just enough light for shadows to breathe. The man at the side door turned the handle. I came up behind him fast, pressed the knife hilt to his throat, not to kill, just to press truth into his nerves. He froze. Who sent you? I whispered. No answer. I pulled his radio from his vest and listened. Unit 1, come in. You're taking too long. I pressed the transmit button. Unit 1's busy. Then I drove my elbow into the man's side and left him unconscious beside the porch. 3 more remained. From the corner of my eye, I caught movement near the trucks, 1 man kneeling, another scanning with binoculars. I stayed low, moving parallel through the tree line. When I reached their rear vehicle, I could finally make out their conversation. Simple, clipped words. Just find him. Preston said to make it clean. Of course it was him. I threw a small rock across the opposite side of the clearing. Both men turned instinctively. Years of deployment sharpen you to silence, and that silence became my ally again. I moved behind them, snapped a photo with the pen cam, then whispered into the night, loud enough for them to hear. You shouldn't have come here. They spun around and saw nothing, because by the time they aimed, I was gone. I didn't stay to fight. I wanted them alive, terrified, talking. After 15 minutes of confusion and radio static, they retreated, dragging their unconscious partner back into the truck. I memorized the partial plate before they sped off. Sometimes the best strike isn't violence, it's fear. Make them doubt every sound, every shadow, every whisper of wind. Soldiers hate ghosts, and I just reminded them one still existed. When I re-entered the cabin, Harper was wide awake, clutching her phone. She'd heard everything. Dad, what was that? Visitors, I said simply. Her hands shook. You said this was safe. It is now. I knelt beside her and met her eyes. Listen to me carefully. You're not the target. This is about control. They want me scared enough to stop. Are you? No, my voice came out steady. I'm the wrong man to scare. She looked like she wanted to cry but didn't. She just said, You're becoming someone else again. I answered softly, No, I'm remembering who I was. The next morning, Victor showed up in person. He looked at the knocked-over gravel tracks and whistled. They really sent in a team? 3 men, I said. Trained, but sloppy. You could have taken them all. wasn't the point. Now Preston thinks he scared me. That's the mistake I'm counting on. Victor frowned. You sure this isn't going too far? I poured coffee, still calm. Far was when they laughed at my daughter. This is justice catching up. He didn't argue. Before leaving, he handed me a flash drive. Federal contacts. They're finalizing indictments. Preston's facing perjury, bribery, witness tampering. But there's one thing missing, his explicit tie to the case. I smiled faintly. That's about to change. That night, I went online using a secure network Victor provided. In a hidden folder of Preston's cloud, something Felix had decrypted weeks ago, I found a voice memo dated the night before the court verdict. I hit play. Preston's voice was clear. Delete the full footage. We'll handle this like the others. My nephew can't go down for one girl. She'll forget in time. That single line was everything. The final bullet. I uploaded the recording anonymously to 3 national outlets. No narration. No commentary. Just his own words. For 30 minutes, nothing happened. Then my phone vibrated. Notifications. Messages. The internet had exploded. Headlines everywhere. Judge caught in audio recording. Orders evidence destruction. I leaned back in my chair, finally exhaling. It's over, I murmured. Harper emerged from the hallway, the glow of her phone lighting her face. Dad, it's everywhere. People are demanding his arrest. They're calling you a hero. I shook my head. Heroes save lives, Harper. I just told the truth. She stared at me quietly, then said, You might have just saved more than you think. Outside, dawn began to creep over the horizon. For the first time in years, it felt like peace was possible. But deep inside, I knew the war wasn't done, because men like Preston don't surrender. They hide. They rebuild. And when they do, I'll be waiting. Because once the hunter becomes hunted, the rules change forever. When men like Preston begin to lose everything, they don't accept defeat. They reach for the one weapon every coward has left, the innocent. The morning after his audio confession flooded the internet, reporters said he'd vanished, his phone's off, his estate empty. The Bureau issued a warrant, but I knew better. Men with power don't run. They hide where no one looks. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt that old storm building again, the one I knew from deployments, right before a strike. Harper was calmer than I'd seen her in months. She was finally leaving the house, meeting lawyers, helping other victims come forward. I started to believe maybe, just maybe, we were done. I was wrong. It started late that night. Victor called with tension in his voice. Mason, something's off. 2 of Preston's business partners disappeared. Their families filed missing reports. That's not our problem anymore, I said, but my gut disagreed. He sighed. That's what I thought too. Until I heard your name being passed on chatterboards, whispers about leverage. Someone said the word daughter. My blood ran cold. Say that again. Leverage, Victor repeated. You know what it means. I didn't reply. I was already moving, checking the house, secure windows, locked doors, camera feed steady. Everything looked fine. Too fine. Harper, I called. Her door didn't open. I knocked again, louder. Harper. No answer. The silence hit harder than any bullet I'd taken overseas. I hit the door with my shoulder, splintered it on impact. The room was empty. Her phone still on the desk, bed unmade, window wide open. Outside, tire marks scored the dirt driveway. Someone had taken her fast. My breathing slowed, the soldier in me taking over. The fear came later. Planning came first. Within 30 minutes, I had Victor on another line, tracing cell towers, scanning any license plate that passed the cameras near my property. Got something, he said after 5 minutes. Gray van, no plates, 32 miles north heading to Route 14. You'll need to move fast. I'm already moving, I said, grabbing my jacket and knife. I didn't bother grabbing luggage or cash. There's no use for money in war. The route ahead blurred under the headlights. Every mile felt like a heartbeat lost. The part of me that once promised I'd never become that man again. The soldier, The ghost was gone. They'd broken that promise for me. At the 30-mile mark, Victor's voice came through again. Mason, there's chatter saying Harper's being taken to a property Preston used for private meetings. Abandoned lake house by the cliffs. Coordinates sent. I hit the gas until the engine screamed. The lake house sat in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by pine trees and water black as ink. My truck stopped 100 yards short. I killed the lights and stepped out. No other sound. No crickets. No wind. Just the low hum of a generator somewhere deeper inside. Through the scope of my small night lens, I saw two figures by the porch. Guards with rifles, nervous, pacing. They weren't professionals. Mercenaries maybe, but amateurs under pressure. That detail gave me confidence. Chaos favors experience. And I was born in it. I circled the back trail, quiet and low, until I had a clear path through the brush. I picked up a small rock and threw it into the far trees. One of the guards turned away just long enough for me to move in. Quick strike, hand over his mouth, pulling him down silently. He didn't even have time to breathe wrong before he was out cold. The second guard looked confused, tapping his radio. "Jake? You good?" I stepped behind him and whispered, "He's taking a nap," then slammed his face against the wooden rail hard enough to drop him instantly. War had taught me one unspoken rule: fast, clean, quiet. Anything else was suicide. Inside the cabin, it smelled like dust, damp wood, and old fear. I moved room by room until I heard a muffled sound. Downstairs, basement level. I found the stairs and crept down slowly. One dim bulb swung overhead, and there she was, Harper, tied to a chair, tape across her mouth, eyes wide with terror until they met mine. Relief flooded them. I pressed a finger to my lips. She nodded, tears spilling silently. But before I could cut the tape, footsteps echoed above. Two men, talking. One voice unmistakable. "Preston, make sure she doesn't speak again," he said, his tone no longer polished, cracked, desperate. "Once I'm gone, burn this place down." He was panicking, irrational, running out of masks to wear. I could hear it in every breath he took. I cut Harper free fast, pulled her close. "Stay low," I whispered. "Don't move until I say." The stairs creaked. Preston's shadow appeared at the top, gun drawn, shaking. He spoke down into the darkness. "I knew you'd come, Mason. Always the hero." I stepped out of the shadows slowly, unarmed, letting him see my face. "You forgot who you laughed at." He pointed the gun loosely. "You ruined me. That's not justice, that's vengeance." "No," I said quietly. "This is consequence." Harper crawled behind a support beam as Preston moved forward, his hand trembling. He wasn't a soldier, just a coward with a weapon. I took one deliberate step toward him. "You think fear makes you powerful? You don't know fear until you've watched it tear your daughter apart while men like you smiled." He hesitated. Just enough. I closed the distance, grabbed the barrel, twisted it down. The gun went off, a deafening flash, but the bullet lodged in the floor. I threw him back hard. His head hit the railing with a dull crack. He wasn't dead, just stunned. Enough to end this right. I pointed his own recorder, still clipped to his suit pocket, at him and clicked it on. "Say it, Preston. Tell them what you did." He blinked through blood. "You think any of this matters? They'll replace me with another name. Then start the chain," I said. And for the first time, I saw it, real fear. He looked away, defeated. "I did it," he muttered. "I ordered it destroyed. All of it. The footage, the testimony. I didn't care what happened to your girl. That was it. I had everything." Harper sobbed softly behind me, whispering my name. I pulled his weapon away. "You'll face justice this time. Not mine, not the courts. The people's." He slumped, shoulders shaking. Before I could say more, sirens howled in the distance. "Victor's doing." I'd called him before entering. As I walked Harper outside, dawn painted the sky pale blue. She clung to my arm as federal cars came roaring down the dirt road. Agents stormed past us, shouting orders, guns raised. Inside, they found Preston still conscious, muttering to himself. Harper looked up at me, shaking. "Is it over, Dad?" I brushed a dirt streak from her cheek. "Almost. You just took back what they stole." She smiled faintly through tears. "You found me." I looked at her, the same little girl I used to carry on my shoulders, and said, "Always." The sun finally broke through the trees, lighting the lake like fire. For the first time in this long war, I wasn't chasing enemies. I was walking away with everything they tried to destroy. But deep down, I knew one final act remained. Justice wasn't complete until the world saw it happen. And the next chapter would make sure no one like Preston ever hid behind a title again. The morning after the raid felt like waking up after a storm that didn't decide whether to leave or stay. Sunlight hit the cabin hard, sharp through the broken windows, dust dancing over the floor where everything had collapsed the night before. Harper slept on the couch wrapped in a wool blanket. Her breathing had that fragile sound, half peace, half exhaustion. I sat near her, replaying Preston's confession on the recorder over and over again. Every word came like a hammer. I did it. I ordered it destroyed. All of it. His voice had become my only proof, but it was also something heavier. The sound of a predator realizing the cage had closed. Victor arrived right after sunrise, headlights cutting through the fog. He stepped inside carefully, looked at Harper, then at me. "You did it," he said quietly. "They've got him in custody. Press wants confirmation. You're the center of it now." "I don't want the spotlight," I said. "Doesn't matter what you want," he replied. "You dragged the devil into daylight. People want to see the man who did that." I nodded slowly, thinking about it. "Then they'll see the truth, not the man." By afternoon, Preston's arrest was everywhere. Video clips played non-stop, him being escorted out in handcuffs, reporters shouting questions he refused to answer. Federal agents announced fraud charges, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, multiple counts of abuse of power. It was the kind of fall the public never forgets. But within the headlines, I saw the stories that mattered, the ones about Harper, the daughter who fought back. From victim to voice. Her name no longer carried pity, it carried strength. When she woke up, I held out my phone. "Read this," I said. She scrolled slowly through the articles, eyes filling before she smiled. "They believe me now. They always should have." She stared at me for a long moment. "What about you? Will people know it was you?" "Eventually," I said. "But for now, it's your story, not mine." That evening, Victor and I met at a safe house near the city. Reporters crowded outside like vultures, their lights flashing through the blinds. Inside, federal agents reviewed every piece of evidence, recordings, documents, body cam footage. One agent, a woman with sharp eyes, asked me, "How did you get this confession?" I looked her straight in the eye. "He gave it willingly. You just had to show him what fear really looks like." She didn't ask again. When she left, Victor walked to the window. "You could have killed him," he said. "Would have been easier. But you didn't." I took a slow breath. Killing him would have buried the story. Making him speak kept it alive. He nodded, thoughtful. "So what happens now?" "I make it public myself," I said. "Every word. Live. Real time." He frowned. "You sure? Courts handle that." "The same courts that mocked my daughter?" I shook my head. "No. This one ends in front of everyone." That night, Harper and I drove into the city, no disguises this time. She wanted to come with me. I didn't refuse. She'd earned that. When we arrived at the courthouse steps, hundreds were already gathered, protesters, reporters, ordinary people demanding justice. I carried a small flash drive in my pocket, Preston's confession, the one that couldn't be denied. When I stepped onto the top stair, microphones turned like weapons, flashes blinding my eyes. My voice stayed calm. "My name is Mason," I said. "I served this country for 20 years. I believed in duty, in law, in honor. But last year, my daughter was beaten by a man who thought privilege was armor. When he faced court, they laughed. When we asked for justice, they buried it. So I did what any father would do. I refused to let silence win." Every sound around me disappeared. Only my voice carried through the air. "This," I said, holding up the flash drive, "is the truth they tried to erase." Judge Preston confessed to destroying evidence, bribing officials, and mocking justice itself. He called victims weak. He called power permanent. But power doesn't last. Truth does. Chants broke out in the crowd. Justice for Harper. Justice for all victims. I looked at my daughter standing beside me, tears streaming down, but her chin lifted high. "My daughter is not a victim," I said into the microphones. "She's proof that courage can be inherited." I turned, handed the drive to the lead investigator waiting behind the podium, and stepped back. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then the crowd erupted. Reporters shouting, cameras flashing, people clapping. Harper took my hand, and for the first time since that awful video, I saw a real light in her eyes. The following day, Preston's confession aired during a live federal hearing. His voice boomed through the speakers, the world listening to every corrupt word. Each sentence hit him like a bullet fired from his own mouth. There was no escape now. When the session ended, the judge ordered him held without bail. Reporters said he'd broken down, crying, repeating that no one wins against the system. But he was wrong. Because that night, the system bowed to the truth. A father's patience, a daughter's courage, a story no one could bury anymore. At home, Harper sat by the lake behind our house, the same one where all this began. She threw a rock into the water, watching it skip across the reflection. I sat beside her. "Do you think it's over now?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's over." But I knew inside that wars like these never leave you. They stain your sleep, hide in memories, speak when the night gets too quiet. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You kept your promise." "I told you," I said softly. "They'd know who I am. Not the soldier. The father." A breeze moved across the lake, carrying away the sound of the city far in the distance. For the first time in a long time, the silence felt peaceful. As the last light faded, I stood up, looking at the rippling water reflecting the colors of dusk. The phantom was gone now. The man who once fought wars in deserts had finally buried his own. Justice didn't come from violence. It came from exposure. I didn't win by killing bad men. I won by making them face their own reflection. Behind me, Harper whispered, "Let's go home." And this time, I listened. It wasn't 6 months later or a year later, because real healing didn't happen on a calendar. It happened slowly, in mornings that didn't feel heavy anymore, in silences that didn't hurt, in laughter that finally came back home. Harper changed first. She began walking again in the same park where everything once felt broken. People stopped her sometimes, thanked her, told her she gave them courage to speak their own truth. She never asked for fame. She only asked to be believed. One evening, she said to me, "Dad, you know what peace sounds like." I smiled. "No explosions, no news alerts." She shook her head, laughing softly. "It's the sound of someone closing their laptop and realizing their life is finally their own again." And she was right. This time, peace didn't come from revenge, it came from release. The courts had officially convicted Preston. The same courthouse that once mocked my daughter now echoed with their verdict. Guilty on all counts. His face didn't show arrogance anymore, just the hollow look of a man whose power finally ran out. But I didn't go to watch him fall. I stayed home, by the lake, watching the first drops of rain fall across the surface, soft, steady, cleansing. Harper came out to join me, holding 2 mugs of black coffee. She looked older somehow, not in years, but in spirit. "He's going away forever," she said quietly. "I know. You never said how it feels." I took a deep breath. "It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like beginning." She looked up at me, eyes still brave, still golden. "You're not going back to who you were before all this, are you?" "No," I said. "That man's gone for good. But I've made peace with the one that remains." She smiled a little. "I like him better." That night, the power flickered during a storm. I lit an old candle and flipped through one of Harper's notebooks. Inside, written in her careful handwriting, was a paragraph from a talk she gave at her university. Justice isn't born from anger. It's born from refusal. Refusal to give up, to surrender, to believe the lie that the powerful always win. My father taught me that. I didn't cry, but I paused long enough to feel something I hadn't in a long time. Pride without pain. A week later, Victor stopped by. No security talk, no updates. Just two friends on a quiet porch with a pair of beers. He chuckled. You know, there's something almost legendary about you now. They call you the seal who took down the judge. I smiled faintly. Let them talk. Legends don't raise daughters. Fathers do. He nodded at that, staring out at the water. So what's next for you, Mason? I looked up at the horizon, where the last bit of sun touched the lake. Nothing loud. Maybe I'll build something. Maybe I'll just sleep without dreaming of sand and sirens. He laughed. You've earned that. As the night faded, I walked down the dock and stared at my reflection rippling under the moonlight. For the first time, it didn't scare me. Because the phantom, the seal who lived in shadow, was finally gone. What stood there now was just a man. A father. A reminder that truth, no matter how buried, always finds its voice again. I made one final vow to myself right there. If life ever tries to silence the innocent again, I'll be ready, not as a soldier, but as a storyteller of pain turned to purpose. Because sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought on battlefields, they're fought inside the quiet spaces of the heart. So this is where our story ends. A Navy SEAL who found peace not through violence, but by restoring what was taken: dignity, justice, and love. And before we close this chapter, I want to ask you something. What would you fight for if everyone around you told you your truth didn't matter? Tell me in the comments, share your thoughts, and let me know where in the world you're watching from. I'd love to know who stood through this story with me tonight. And if this journey moved you, if you felt that quiet tug in your chest while listening, then don't just scroll away. Tap that like, press subscribe, and stay close, because soon I'll bring you another thriller, emotional, epic revenge story that will pull you right to the edge again. Until then, take care of your hearts, protect your peace, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous warriors are the ones who fight with patience, not bullets. See you in the next story.